Hello, today we will recap a psychological thriller movie, in which a kidnapper robbed a man 20 years of his life for no reason. What happened to him after that will surprise you. Before we start, please subscribe to our channel for more such amazing recaps. Spoilers ahead, chill out and enjoy. In the beginning, we're introduced to Joe Doucette, who is an alcoholic and a short-tempered advertising executive. Joe's supervisor informs him that the clients he's about to see today are important to the business, and that he must avoid losing them at all costs. Joe receives a phone call from his ex-wife Donna. On call, Donna angrily confronts him and demands to know why he hasn't shown up for their daughter's birthday. But he feels no regret for it, and he feels no duty to see either his wife or kid. He tells her that the 3-year-old wouldn't care, and that he needs to attend a business meeting with his clients, a couple. Joe realizes that his ideas are impressing the woman, so he begins flirting with her as soon as her husband goes to take a call. He is eventually rejected by the woman and discovered by the client. He stumbles into his buddy Chucky's bar and asks him for more alcohol. Chucky notices his dizziness, and refuses to serve him because the bar is closed. Joe walks away, but then he sees a woman in the street carrying a yellow umbrella. When he approaches her, the scene shifts. Joe later awakens in a hotel room, presumably after hugging the woman he met earlier on the street. The woman has mysteriously disappeared. He takes a look around the room and finds he's locked inside. A tray of food is soon slid down the doggy door. Joe pushes his head through the opening and begs to be let go. The kidnappers provide Joe with dumplings from a Chinese restaurant as food, and alcohol for a few days. It irritates him at first, but Joe gradually accepts his fate as a prisoner in a strange room, where he spends much of his time watching television. While watching a fitness video one day, he starts touching his hot dog, just as white fog seeps out of the vents and knocks him out. Unseen employees enter the room while Joe is unconscious, and begin obtaining DNA samples from him. Joe learns one day while watching television, that his wife has been raped and murdered, leaving their 3-year-old daughter Mia for adoption. Joe discovers that he is the top suspect, implying that his captors collected his samples in order to frame him. He hears a man laughing one day, and notices someone sitting on his bed. However, when he approaches him happily, the man vanishes, revealing that it was simply a hallucination. Days turn into months, and Joe, desperate for company, smears blood on his pillow, making what appears to be a poorly drawn cartoon face. Not only that, he befriends a white rat in the room, until one day, the rat gives birth to small pinky rats. Joe falls asleep next to his rat buddies, but when he wakes up, they're gone. Confused, Joe returns to his bedroom, and notices his daily dinner tray being slipped inside. He sobs in pain, as he sees his rat companion and its pups dead on the plate. This shatters him. He destroys a mirror in the room and injures his wrist with a glass shard. And when he wakes up the following time, he's all patched up. Furthermore, his capture has removed the shattered mirror that Joe used to cut his arm, preventing him from attempting to terminate his life again. Years pass, and Joe relies on the television in his room to keep up with the outside world. When he learns that Mia has been adopted by 2 loving parents, he smiles with relief. He also enjoys watching her play cello while watching television. Joe now has newfound hope as a result of this. As a result, he begins to write letters to his daughter, believing that if he is released, she would be able to read them. He also decides to quit drinking and get in shape, so that he can take revenge one day. Joe devises an escape strategy. Joe manages to pull out some bricks from the wall of his washroom over the years, creating a small gap for an escape. He crawls into it and follows a dark tunnel to the end, where he kicks his way through. Joe then goes back to his room, to get the letters he wrote to his daughter. However, as he prepares to leave, he notices Mia's interview on television. The TV show host asks Mia if she would forgive her father for disappearing. Mia claims in the interview that if her father Joe is still alive, she is willing to attempt to forgive him, despite the fact that he murdered her mother. Just then, gas is released into Joe's room, and he tries but fails to escape. Joe awakens later in a trunk in the middle of a field. He has his letters, some cash, and a smartphone with a countdown timer. Then he notices a woman standing at a distance with a yellow umbrella and runs after her. Joe tries to speak to her, but the woman does not respond. He comes across a man holding an umbrella, and asks him roughly where the woman went. Because Joe's actions generated a commotion, a nurse named Marie approaches him and softly asks him if he's okay. She hands him her card, and he takes it and walks away. Joe visits his old friend Chucky. He tells Chucky everything after 20 years of disappearance. While the two are conversing, Joe receives a phone call from someone, who tells him that he kidnapped Mia. He tells him that he'll keep in touch and hangs up. After the call, Joe asks Chucky to assist him in tracking down whoever done this to him. It is no easy task, considering Joe's vast list of people he has hurt in the past. Chucky discovers him unconscious on the floor the next morning. He discovers Marie's card in Joe's pocket, and contacts her for help. Marie arrives and looks after Joe. When Chucky leaves for a moment, Marie discovers Joe's letters and begins reading them. Joe yanks the letters away from her, and begins acting aggressively. Marie assured him that she accepts his story, and is ready to help him in finding his daughter, and proving his innocence. Joe, now accompanied by Marie, continues his investigation to discover the person, or persons responsible for his kidnapping and imprisonment. Later, he has another idea. He decides to try eating the dumplings served at every single Chinese restaurant, with the word dragon in its name, because that's all he's been fed for the past 20 years. Marie excuses herself from the search at some point because she has to go to work. Joe then continues his hunt on his own. He was able to locate the restaurant that supplied the dumplings. Joe begins to observe the customers, and when he notices someone checking out with a large amount of food, he follows him. The man parks his car near some sort of facility. Joe eliminates him and takes the food inside. He then murders the receptionist once inside. We learn here that Joe was not the only one imprisoned. We see Cheney, the owner of this facility, keeping an eye on several other people who are locked up. Cheney, like Joe, notices that the captives have yet to be fed. He comes out of his room to check on his workers, but as he does, Joe attacks him. Cheney is tortured by him by cutting open flesh wounds all over his neck. Cheney tells him to find an audio recording and listen to it. In the recording, Cheney's boss simply orders him to imprison Joe for 20 years, without explaining why. Joe flees the room, holding Cheney captive. He throws Cheney at the men as he exits the building, but the men follow him. It's at this point that Joe shows what he got from being held in the strange room. Joe eventually wins the fight, although he suffers a stab wound to the back. Joe receives a missed call from the kidnapper while drinking at Chucky's bar. When Joe phones him back, a phone starts ringing at Chucky's bar. A man picks it up, looks Joe in the eyes, and says it's about time we meet. Joe grabs a knife and attacks the man without thinking. His female bodyguard, though, stops him. The man then offers Joe 2 challenges that he must complete within the next 48 hours. Joe must first discover the man's identity. 2. Joe must discover why the man kidnapped and imprisoned him for 20 years. If Joe can find the answers in 2 days, the man promises Joe $20 million worth of diamonds, and proof of Joe's innocence in Donna's case. He will also free his daughter Mia. He also informs him that Cheney and his men are attempting to take revenge by hugging Marie. Joe goes to Marie's help, but he is captured by Cheney's men. Just as Cheney is about to cut and torture Joe, the kidnapper calls and offers Cheney a large sum of money in exchange for Joe's freedom. Cheney accepts his proposal and leaves with his men. Marie begins crying on Joe's shoulder after he saves her. Unbeknownst to the two, the kidnapper is keeping watch on Joe and Marie. The man then calls Joe again, and he notices that the same sound plays in the background of each call. Joe and Marie discover the song is the Evergreen Academy's anthem, using a music recognition app, which is a school Joe went to when he was younger. The two explore deeper, and discover that the school has been closed. Fortunately, they find Joe's old headmistress, and the two decide to pay her a visit. While Marie is conversing with the headmistress, Joe sneaks in through the back entrance to look for information about the institution. He finds a yearbook, and recognizes one of his classmates, Adrian Doyle Price. Following the visit, the two decide to rest and clean up. Joe tells Chucky about their classmate's name, and asks if he remembers anything about him. Chucky appears to have forgotten about him and apologizes to Joe. Marie arrives to replace Joe's bandage after taking a bath. The tension between them has reached new heights, and they begin hugging one another. They are completely unaware that the kidnapper is watching them through hidden cameras. Chucky discovers that the kidnapper is in fact Adrian. While reading about Adrian's sister, something clicks in Chucky's head, and he leaves Joe a message. Adrian, on the other hand, intercepts and deletes the messages. Chucky's mention of Adrian's sister infuriated him. Adrian visits Chucky's place and murders him. Joe and Marie, who are still unaware of what is going on, sneak into the school at night and decide to look through old school records. Joe discovers the record of Adrian's sister, Amanda. As Joe travels down memory lane, he recalls bullying her, and realizes that the man who imprisoned him was none other than Adrian Price, his old classmate and Amanda's brother. He saw her in the school greenhouse one day, being romantic with a much older man, and assumed he was a teacher. Returning to the present, Joe and Marie perform additional research and discover that the Price family relocated after that. Later, the father murdered his wife, Amanda, and then committed suicide, leaving behind a severely injured Adrian. Joe returns to the motel and prepares to visit Adrian. Later, he confronts Adrian, and this time he manages to kill Adrian's trusted bodyguard. Adrian tells Joe that he will give him Mia as well as everything else he promised. However, he requires answers to his questions. First, Joe informs him that he has discovered that he is Adrian Doyle Price, and that he has imprisoned Joe. Joe explains that he didn't know until this day, that the man Amanda was with that day, was their father. Adrian reveals that his father had romantic relationships, with both him and his sister. Joe's previous actions resulted in an even worse outcome than simply destroying Amanda Price, Adrian's sister's self-esteem. Adrian's father was furious, seeing this as a shaming of their family's name. Covered in shame, the father simply snapped one day and decided to kill everyone in the family before killing himself. Adrian survived only because the bullet missed his heart. Because Joe figured it all out, Adrian presented him with the promised $20 million worth of diamonds. Furthermore, he leads Joe to another room to see his daughter. Adrian mentions that Joe never asked the most important question: why was he released? Adrian leads Joe into a room, where he sees the sets of the television shows Joe used to watch while imprisoned. Everything Joe was shown on television about Mia was staged by the girl, who was shown as Mia is actually a paid actress and a musician. Joe is furious, and he starts to question where the real Mia is. Adrian says that in order to see Mia, Joe must answer the last question: why was he released? Adrian plays a slideshow, showing Joe pictures of his daughter from childhood to the present day. He explains that he changed her name, found her the right parents, and provided her with the ideal environment to grow into a lovely woman. Adrian managed to make them spend time together, eventually hugging each other, so Joe could finally understand the pain that Adrian's family, and especially his sister, went through. Joe is disgusted and disappointed in himself at this point. Adrian takes his own life after taking his revenge. The movie ends with Joe leaving a goodbye note to Marie, along with the diamonds. In the note, he tells her that he can no longer see her, and that he has done something unforgivable, for which he must punish himself. Joe then pays Cheney with some of the diamonds to imprison him in his facility for the rest of his life. So this was the story of Oldboy, which was released in 2013. If you like the story, then do watch the full film, and if you want to watch more such amazing recaps, then do subscribe to our channel. See you in the next recap.